Welcome to the Impulse Spotlight, a podcast for product development professionals. In this episode, we talk to a longtime colleague of mine who loves playing golf and practicing his guitar, and he even once played on stage with the 90s band Oleander. Todd Reese is the president of Realize Inc., a prototype and 3D printing service provider. In our conversation, we discuss a variety of topics within the realm of additive manufacturing and prototyping. From the intriguing origins of Realize Inc. to the meticulous processes involved in 3D printing, Todd shares valuable insights into the company's capabilities and specialized services. We also dive into the importance of client education, exceeding client expectations, the technical aspects of material selection, and which CAD files are most often used. Strap in and get ready to learn about the evolution of consumer-level 3D printers, the impact 3D printing has on products' time to market, and the significance of preserving design details within the rapid prototyping industry. Let's get into it. Hey, Todd, welcome to the show.
Hey, Troy, how's it going, man? I appreciate the opportunity to be a first vendor on your podcast here. So looking forward to talking with you for the next half hour or so.
Yep, it's going to be awesome. So I started Impulse over 25 years ago, worked for a product development company that you're very aware of, and kind of saw the writing on the wall that wasn't going to be around much longer. So long story short, started Impulse and just started it to help product design firms design products.
Sure.
So how did you get your company started?
Well, it was a very similar situation. So for those of you listening out there, watching out there, Troy and I actually worked for the same company. So this was a company that I started with actually right before I graduated from college in 1993. So again, it was a product development company that sort of touched on all facets of that cycle, all the way from industrial design through short run injection molding. So when I started in that company, my whole, I guess, dream job was going to be like a CAD jockey, designing parts. And I did have an opportunity to do that, on one or two projects. But as a startup company, it was very, very small. I think I was the fifth employee. So everybody was doing a little bit of everything in there. And I just sort of naturally gravitated towards that 3D printing side of things and became, well, one, very interested in it. And then two, I was good at it. So worked for that company for 6 years. And like yourself, we did see, a series of downsizings take place. And it looked like that company was not going to be around a while. And I knew I loved what I did. So took the opportunity to, talk with some family and friends over Thanksgiving of 1998. And then by April of 99, we had already secured financing and, started the company name. And the timing could not have been any better because, as you're well aware too, that company ended up filing for bankruptcy. So it sort of was a seamless transition into Realize.
Yeah. So tell us about Realize and the services you provide.
So yeah, Realize, we are a 3D printing service provider. We do a lot more than just 3D printing. There's auxiliary pieces that we do along with it. So not much on the front end of things. And that's where, our partnership with Impulse and you over the last, 20 some years has been really, really good for us. So when we do get those calls from, say entrepreneurs or somebody that's really, really at the early stages of stuff, we've got somebody that's an expert in that field. So when we come into play, we're typically messing with the 3D printing of parts. We might do some RTV cast urethanes, depending on materials, quantities, things of that nature. And then there's also just, other pieces that we can do as well, providing finishing services, whether it's paint, whether it's, say, like chrome plating for an aesthetic look, whether it's metal plating for more of a structural thing. And then we've also, managed some short run production on the injection molding side of things as well. So kind of staying typically in that prototype realm, although, in the last, especially say 10 years or so, we've seen a lot more parts coming off of 3D printers that are used in more of a production environment. So that's exciting too. And I think eventually that's where, the kind of the dream is to be able to, have this mass customization of parts and being able to, 3D print an actual piece. And it's being done, as we speak.
Sure. Yeah, it's pretty amazing to think about when you started realize what the capabilities were. And now, like, we've got several vendors that have 3D printers and they're printing
Hmm.
production parts,
Right.
just right there in their buildings. So, um, tell us a little bit about your team. What are the different roles that people have to serve your clients?
So we have a pretty small team here. There's 10, 11 of us, including myself. I am still very, very involved with the day-to-day operations as an owner, as the president. I'm still in here in the trenches, getting my hands dirty, in addition to doing books and things like that. We've got a sales team. Obviously, they're making, phone calls, reaching out to, prospects. Also, in some regard, they'll act as project managers as well, and trying to see those projects through the shop as well. We've got an admin team that'll help, just gather details for projects. Feeding them, kind of being a liaison between sales and production. And then, of course, we've got the production team as well. 3D printers run unattended; they run 24/7. So we run two shifts with the production team, and then as far as the weekends go, it's just sort of an on-call thing. The guys will switch off, and on Friday evenings or whatever, we'll have an idea of what needs to be done over the weekend, and typically it's like an in and out kind of thing, for the guys that cover that. And then we've got a finished team as well. You know, Parts that come off of the printers, they still do require a level of finishing, whether it's just a basic strip and ship if somebody needs something quickly, or if it's going to go further than that, in our shop, or if it's something that we end up having to take it to a certain point and then have another vendor offsite, complete some portions of that for us. And then we've got a QC team as well. So we are measuring parts as they come off, making sure, that's kind of more than one application for that there. It's, trying to make sure our machines are always in spec, with what the kind of parts that we're printing out and the tolerances that we can hold, and then as well as making sure that, the parts that are going to the client, fall within their specifications and what they're expecting. So some
Cool.
like super, super tight tolerances. Others are more concerned maybe about the aesthetics of the part versus the dimensions of it. So, I think having that small team of people also makes it very easy for us to pivot and really, I guess, tailor our services to what the client needs versus somebody contacting us and we say, okay, well, step one is this, step two is this. It's not like that with Realize. So very nimble, again, small team, able to react and get things done on a dime when we need to, and that's kind of what we do. We have a lot of companies or clients that will call us, and it's an emergency situation. So that's sort of the nature of our business, and it's kind of exciting. It gives you a little adrenaline rush every day when you're getting those phone calls and how can we
Sure.
do this? Because we're excited to do that stuff.
Sure. A minute ago, you mentioned strip and ship.
Mhm.
3D printers are pretty popular now, so people probably understand what goes on. But do you want to explain, like, why do you have to strip anything, and what you're
Sure.
stripping, and just kind of, for those that don't know, give
Yeah.
them an overview, I guess, of what happens as a part's built.
Right. So there are many different 3D printing technologies that are out there. Here at Realize in-house, we've got selective laser sintering, SLS. There's stereolithography, known as SLA. Then there's FDM, which is a fused deposition modeling. So there's a lot of different methods out there. There's metals. So when we say strip and ship, it's really just taking it off of the machine and doing as little work to it as possible before we ship it out. So in, let's use SLA for example, those parts require support structures when they're building in that liquid medium. So when parts come out of the machine, we strip off those supports with a putty knife or whatever, clean it in an alcohol solution, post cure it, and then pretty much check the measurements and get it out the door. So there's not really any, say, sanding down of the parts to make it smooth. And that's what I kind of touched on a little bit earlier in regards to our finish team. That even though you have these hundreds of thousands of dollars machines making parts for you, it still requires a level of a skill set after the fact that's more on the human side of things,
Yeah.
to really hone the parts in. With SLS, that's a powder base. There's no supports. So that's really just blowing off the powder. Again, measuring things, that's a step that we just don't skip. We've got printouts of every part that we do, and QC is writing down at least overall dimensions for every part that we go out. And then, we'll get like monthly reports, and and you can kind of see trends on like, okay, we've got this machine, we've been seeing some, maybe measurements are walking out on a little bit. So that machine might need some attention, whether it's run a new scale build, or do we need to have an FEN field engineer for like a maintenance issue?
Okay.
So yeah, strip and ship is really just as little work as you can do to a part possible before you get it out the door.
Yeah. It's interesting though. I think a lot of people that don't understand the whole picture of 3D printing think, oh, you just send the part out and you get it built and you take it out of the machine and put it in a box and ship it. And there's just so much more that goes on.
Yeah. And I think one day, there are things that are getting better, and you read about some of these things with like the holograms, how they can like basically the part will realize itself at one time. And
Mhm.
I think down the road there's some exciting stuff that could take place, but that's one that's always been fascinating to me, is that hologram thing that they've experimented with.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier entrepreneurs. At Impulse we work with entrepreneurs, individuals, small design teams, medium, even big, large design teams. What's the range of client that you work with?
Yeah, that's typical for us as well. It's really a wide range. I think our sweet spot is those medium-sized companies that don't necessarily have those 3D printing technologies in house. Again, we're a service provider. Of course, in the last 10, 15 years, and really 3D printing, I think, became more of a household term in like the right before we hit like 2010, like that 2008, 2009 timeframe. And started getting more traction that way. So we've definitely seen a lot more clients, have some level of 3D printers in their shop. So what we've seen is maybe a decline in like the one-off kind of parts, and where they're doing them themselves in house. And then when it comes to higher quantities or maybe different materials, that's where we will, I guess, make our mark.
Sure. I assume size would be a time where somebody that has an in-house printer might call you.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've got, again, small machines. So we might have the ability to build something in, say, like a higher resolution than they're capable of doing. And the same with a large part. I mean, we've built parts that are, 5, 6 feet long.
Oh, wow.
Our largest machine will handle a part in one piece that's about, say, 31 inches by 31 inches and about 22 inches tall.
Okay.
But you can, and we have built larger parts. It's just you have to cut and paste, and we try to do that strategically to make sure that when the parts are bonded back together, we do have a very solid bond. So whether it's a dovetail or a tongue and groove, or different kinds of things to do that. We've inserted metal pins into parts just to help things hold together in areas like that. But yeah, the size of the clients that we deal with are, again, entrepreneurs, all the way through large companies. We've just found that sweet spot being that that mid-sized company. A lot less, there's a lot of, I guess, red tape to go through in the larger companies when it comes to, you're not necessarily dealing with the person that needs the parts. You're dealing with purchasing. So there's a lot of levels and a lot of maybe phone calls that need to be made. But again, it's something that we enjoy doing, and whatever the challenge is, building a part or trying to get to the right person, it's all a lot of fun.
Sure. If you had to boil it down to one thing, what's the biggest thing about your service that keeps your clients coming back time and time again?
I think it has to do with like the size of our team and then the quality of our team. When you do a transaction with Realize, it's an experience. I mean, you're going to get that one-on-one conversation with somebody, and those are, I take pride in, we've remained this family-owned company since 1999, and that I think that really shows, I think our reputation in the industry is we're thought of very highly. Our team members are, qualified. They've been with us forever. That's one thing that we've noticed here is very, very little turnover. We've got people that have been here 10, 15 years. So I think that speaks a lot to it. The quality of the parts that people are receiving, in addition to just the conversations we have with them at the beginning of the process and then throughout the process, all the way up until they, receive their parts, and we're following up with them, making sure that, hey, did everything go for you? We see that your, part was delivered, because, even to my email address, I've got every shipment that goes out of here. I know when it's delivered to the client, so we can, make sure that there were no hiccups throughout, shipping.
Sure. So from your perspective, obviously you kind of live in this corner of the product development world. What are the biggest challenges you see product development professionals facing?
So that's a good question. Over the years, we've seen, I guess, the understanding of 3D printing and what the capabilities are of it. And I think there's almost like two different sides to it. Some people overestimate what it can do, but others underestimate what it can do. So I think, and again, that's where we can come in and try to help educate. I wouldn't say we're consultants so much, but education is a very big part of, especially with a new client, and trying to dig in and just, when they send you a part and say, print this, there's more to it than that. It's like, okay, what are you going to use this for? What's the environment it's going to be in? Just what are the expectations? And it'll help us point them to the right technology, which we may not have that technology here. We might send it out, but ultimately we want to do what's best for that client. And I think that, that's one of the biggest challenges that they're facing is, having the right information on what can be done or what cannot be done with the 3D printing technologies that are out there.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. I mean, that it's not their specialty, right? They know what they've read and they've picked up over time, and that's all they need. So
yeah, I mean, we'll have people call in or email us or whatever, or reach out to our website, and they'll call out a certain material, and our first question is why. Just making sure, why did you pick this material?
It's interesting. That's a good answer to that question. It's interesting to understand that. How does so you talked, you do education. Is there a formal process of that, or is it just more of like when the need arises? You can
I think it's more of
mode for a minute.
Yeah, I think it's more of an organic conversation, and having those opening conversations with a client, and even clients that have been with us for a long time. They've got something new that comes up, and again, I think that's something that we take pride in too. Is like, man, if you're just struggling with like some kind of problem, just use us as a sounding board. Just give us a call and say, hey, I'm facing this, or want to do X with Y, and do you have any ideas on how this might work? And we might shrug our shoulders and say we don't know, and there might be issues where it's like, hey, we have, I know somebody who might know something here. Let's get a hold of it. And there are times when we can maybe say come to the rescue with a solution for them in house.
Sure. And you don't charge for anything like that, right?
Typically we don't. Yeah.
That's one thing we try to get our clients and prospective clients to do too. Like, we've done this for over 25 years, call and ask. We may not know the answer, but we may have, we've got a lot of resources and a lot of, experience. So use it.
Yeah, and it's funny too, looking back, talking about experience, and looking back, like when I first started in the industry and how the software has changed. Like when I first started working on like an SLS machine in the past, there was no 3D. Like it was all you had to do. It was almost like set up in a spreadsheet, and then you'd have to go through it layer by layer and see how things would work and how it was going to come together. And I kind of think that helps us be a little bit better at what we do, because we were kind of ushered in from that into the 3D, where you could actually see the parts on the screen and spin them around and see if they're touching or not. So it was much more of a cumbersome, thing back in the day when we show our age by talking about these things. Um, but yeah.
Well, how does your service help? I mean, I think it's kind of obvious, but let's talk about it anyway. How does your service help product development teams achieve faster time to market?
Yeah, speed to market is a big thing. Obviously, everyone wants to get their product out there as quickly as they can and have it done right. So I think with the caliber of equipment that we've got, the number of machines that we have over a dozen, again, ranging in size from, parts or pieces that can be built at very small layer thicknesses and fine layer size or fine laser sizes so you can get that detail up to, machines that you're building like say half an engine block or something along that line, and a machine's just got say a little fatter laser beam and can draw faster, and it's just all about the speed. So getting parts to clients quickly is a big one. And then I think that we're seeing a lot more complex projects, so it's not necessarily anymore print this part. It might be something like, hey, this is what I guess assembly might be the right word to use. We see a lot more like assembly style stuff. And it could be a marriage of, this 3D printing technology, this 3D printing technology, and then there's going to be, say, some RTV and cast models done with it. And we have to make sure that those all, fit together and go together seamlessly. And then it's just kind of incredible what the clients can do with the tests, like the real world testing that they can pull off with that stuff. So I think it's really helping them shorten their entire cycle. And, I think those type of clients are the ones that are pushing a lot of 3D printing, that industry, and like what can be done with them. Because again, it's so much more than just parts.
Sure.
There's again these big assemblies, quantities are going up where people used to do onesie twosies, and now it's not uncommon for us to see orders for 100 200 parts that are printed. And then of course the quicker we can knock them out, again, we have a fleet of machines here, so trying to keep them all in check with each other. So let's say you build part A on this machine, part B on this machine, you got to make sure that they're still going to fit together. So
Sure.
Making sure that those quality pieces are in place, the machines are maintained on a maintenance level, kind of like an oil change or rotating your tires on your car. Just want to do everything you can to keep it running.
Sure. You mentioned the case where you had a bunch of different machines building for one assembly.
Mm-hmm.
Was it in all the machines because you were looking for different materials or different colors, or?
It can be both, actually. So some of the materials have different properties. We've got like an opaque white, got black material, got like a kind of a grayish material. We got clear materials. So a lot of times we might do, let's say, a housing for a consumer electronics part, and they want like a little, a window piece that's going to fit into a hole where like an LED or something might be behind it. So yeah, a lot of times it has to do with what they're looking to do as far as an aesthetic standpoint. A lot of times we've got one client in particular that whenever we see an order come in, usually it's multiple parts. Like there might be, say, 25 components that go to their assembly, and they like to pick different materials just for a color contrast, just so they can see the different pieces in there versus having to go in and say, paint this one a certain color or that one another color. Just kind of helps them differentiate the different pieces that are all together in their assembly. And then it could be just quantity. Sometimes clients don't necessarily care what the material is. They just need a lot of parts and they need them fast. So at that point, we can spread them between several machines and again, try to reduce that time to delivery.
Sure. You mentioned different materials. How many different material options do you have?
Oh, see, currently in house right now, I'm gonna say we have like maybe 6 or 7.
Okay.
And that's like straight out of 3D printing machines. And then, once you go into the world of cast urethanes, where we'll make like a one-off master pattern that we're going to replicate pieces of, urethanes, there's literally thousands of, you know, different ones you can choose from with different properties, different hardnesses. Um, so, we've got our favorite, say, probably 24 materials that we go to, but, you know, it's kind of funny the questions that we'll get from clients. It's like, again, we've been doing this for a long, long time, and you're still like, wow, I've never heard that question before. So, again, that's fun for us too, because we, feel like we're still learning stuff every day too in this industry.
Yeah. Can you share a story of a specific example of a client that came to you and used your service, and they had this successful outcome?
Yeah, actually, we've got a good one, and you're kind of a piece of this too. So I remember I was sitting here one night at the office. It was a little bit later in the evening, say 6:30, 6:45. Us being on Eastern time, we do have clients on the West Coast. So, typically there's 2 or 3 of us around a little bit later in the evenings. And then, of course, we've got that second shift on the production side. But yeah, I had a guy call, and he just had an idea and asked if we were familiar with a guitar. And I'm like, actually, I've got an acoustic one sitting like right behind me here. And he's like, oh man, you've just saved me like 20 minutes worth of explaining stuff to you. And so again, he had an idea, didn't have a sketch on a napkin or anything. And, again, since our expertise is not necessarily in design, we turn them over to Impulse product development for that phase of things. And we went through iteration after iteration of prototypes for this guy. And the prototypes were useful. Like, he could strap it onto the guitar. It was a piece that was, I guess, twofold. It could be used for teaching guitar, and it could also be, say, somebody kind of, as their hands don't work like they once did, they can still play these, I guess, basic chords with just a push of a button, almost like Guitar Hero style. And ultimately, that product hit the market. Made in the USA. Chord Buddy is what it's called. Again, you're very familiar with this. And ultimately, he went on Shark Tank and got a deal from a shark, and is continuing to sell those Chord Buddies to this day.
Yeah. That was a crazy and fun project.
Yeah, it was a good time. I mean, it was spread over. It was quite a while that we went through those iterations, but
Yeah.
It's fun to see those kind of successes because one, Travis was such a good guy and just passionate about, but everything just a hoot to talk to. So, so it was a good time.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that you don't force your clients into a specific process. We do the same thing. We try to do everything we can to just, hey, we're going to work in your process. But what does it look like when a client comes to you? Like, there has to be some process. What's the process look like for them to start doing business with you and get parts?
So when a client first comes to us, we have to, where we're going to do our best service on the front end is if they have a 3D model already created. Occasionally we'll get people come to us with just a print, and usually it's like a nice drawing, like a fully spec'd out drawing. Those are helpful, but ultimately we do need a 3D CAD file where we can see the the overall size of it, as well as the volume of the part. That does play into, say, pricing and timing as well. So yeah, 3D model is definitely, like, I'd say the major first step that they would need to provide us with. And at that point, we can provide an estimate proposal depending on the scope of their project. And then really it's just kicking it back to them and then seeing how they want to proceed. Again, flexibility comes we've had guys want to stop by and pick up parts, or they want to come by and actually watch their parts building in the machine. So yeah, it's just, not so much a process outside of that first step of CAD file.
Sure. So obviously getting a CAD file would be one of these, but are there any other best practices that people should know about? Some like do's and don'ts to make things run smooth.
So the machines our machines typically ultimately eat an STL file, which is it's a representation of your CAD data, and you can control that representation by changing the setting in whatever software package that you're using, that you're doing your, designing in, whether it's SolidWorks or whatever. Because in one of those CAD packages, if you've got something that's round, it is a true round. Where when you move it over to an STL standpoint, you're turning it into kind of a point cloud, for lack of a better description. So the tighter that you can put those points together, the more true you're going to be to your CAD file. The more loose you are with those settings, you're going to have a very coarse piece. So if you've got like a cylinder, it could come out with a lot of very facets that are very apparent, very visually not pleasing. Doing that stuff, a lot of time we'll work more with step files or IGES files. Step's probably been the most one that we use these days. That way we can control the quality of the STL file that goes into our machines. But we will have we'll kick back to the client and say, yeah, I mean, we could build this part as is with these facets on here, but I don't think you're going to get out of it what you want to get out of it. So if you could just change to it or send us the step file instead, that's going to ultimately make you happier with what you get and do a better job with it.
Yeah. So just a few more questions and start to wrap up. But what's the biggest change you've seen in your business over the years?
Again, I think going from just parts to these more complex projects, that's been a big one. Just the advancement of the technologies, the things we're doing with metal now, and all these other different processes that are out there. I think that when the, say, consumer level machines first started coming out, they were very consumer level. I think those are becoming more advanced now. I think there's a lot of really good, say, like FDM style printers, and really even SLA style printers that you can get for, I mean, it's still a hefty chunk of change, but you're not spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I think those are making definitely an impact, on that, those early onesie, twosies, that they're just trying to roll out some early design stuff. So we don't necessarily see that churning like we used to. So that's been a big one too. And then, again, just, more and more companies bringing in machines themselves. So, we find ourselves, we have challenges, as does everybody else. But we're confident in the services that we provide. We have a wide range of materials. So a lot of times when a company will bring a machine in-house, a printer in-house, they might just run one material. So when they do need a different material, or if they need, like you were saying earlier, a larger or a smaller part, we're still there to fill that. So we've got a lot of clients that have machines in-house, but we still hear from them like on the regular.
Yeah. This question is kind of almost the same, I guess, but maybe we can look out a little further. What are some of the emerging trends that you're seeing in your part of the product development world?
I definitely see that those, again, the barrier of entry is becoming a little bit less. Like the quality of machines is a lot better than it once was. And again, I know we talked earlier on an email exchange about like some AI stuff as well. And, that's interesting as well. I don't know if this is going to lead into another question altogether, but so if I'm tying them together, maybe a little early, but, that I think could be a cool trend with how the machines and the quality of the parts could change with that. The machines could learn, from themselves, like have that feedback system in there where you're, let's say, measuring the strength of a part, because this is layer added technology, you're a lot of times going to get different properties in the different directions. So it might lead to, hey, now we like, what's your goal for this part? Do you want like the ultimate strength out of it? Then the machine's going to know, hey, you need to build it this way. If you need it fast, you need to build it this way. I think that designing so we still have a lot of instances where there's a lot of feature detail that can be compromised because of the nature of the process itself. So there's some, adjustments that are made on the software side of things. So, like in regards to the diameter of the laser beam, we have to offset for that to get like true dimensions. The same with like there's a factor in there called like Z compensation, where, say for the example of stereolithography, that first layer or two that gets hit with the laser beam, it doesn't know to go down like just one layer and stop. It might bleed a little bit down there. So in order to get that correct dimension, we might need to shave off a couple bottom layers. That way, when it's all said and done, it's the right size.
Yeah.
So that can lead to compromising of features if there are small features on there. So I think that, the whole AI thing too, it could be very helpful in helping the machine preserve those details without, completely losing them, which we'll see now and again. Thin walls can just go away.
Sure. So I was going to ask about AI. Is there anything else you see AI kind of impacting your industry?
I mean, those are the big ones, I think, and just how you can make better parts and making better. And so metals is a good one. We don't have metals here. We were talking earlier about strip and ship. I know that like strip and ship for metals is a completely different beast. And I've also heard that, I mean, you can have 20 years worth of plastics under your belt with 3D printing, and you step into the metal world and you know nothing, like nothing transfers.
Yeah.
So, but I know that, again, I think with, say, the different methods that can be done with metals after the fact, the heat treating and all that stuff, and again, the orientation of parts. I think AI is going to play a pretty good role in that, and we'll see how it. I'm anxious to see how it could feed back into the front end of the software kind of things.
Yeah, yeah.
And I haven't heard a lot in that space, but there's been a lot of talk of AI lately too. So
yeah, it's coming. You just don't know exactly how yet. So last question, and we'll wrap up. In your experience, what are some of the most underutilized features or tools that you guys have to offer that people underestimate?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of comes from that, again, we talked about earlier in regards to like the education, and I guess some clients will call in and they might be surprised or not quite understand what can be done with 3D printing. So I think when they're not as educated in those early conversations, they may not know that, okay, this material can go up to X degrees, and you don't have to, go to a secondary process, or you might be able to, mimic this with this material versus going to like an injection molding tool or something like that. So I think that's the big thing. It's just making sure that they're educated enough to understand what can be done without having unrealistic expectations either. It's not going to build a 4-foot part in like overnight kind of thing, but so I think just keeping it real with them and just setting the expectations, and trying to, I guess, over deliver, and again exceeding those expectations.
Sure. Cool. This has been awesome. Is there anything else you want to add, mention, make sure that people know about when it comes to Realize?
I think we covered a pretty good piece of it. I mean, it's been a fun ride. I mean, I absolutely love what I do. We love every phone call we get. We come in and don't necessarily know who's going to be on the other end of the phone. So, over the years, we've been presented with some really exciting projects. And, as you're well in this line of the business, we can't necessarily talk about a lot of it because we're under so much non-disclosures. And again, we're pretty early in that design cycle. So, obviously everyone's trying to protect their goods before they hit the market.
Sure.
But yeah, it's just, we really enjoy what we do. Everybody here loves what we do. We have a good time doing it. It's still, so I fell into this industry in 1993. So, over 30 years now, and I'll still find myself with my head on the glass back there, just watching something build. Still to this day, just fascinates me. So,
Yeah.
Again, just highlighting how, say, nimble we are, and can react quickly and work with clients' process versus having to mold them into ours.
Sure.
And just encouraging people to give us a call and talk about those problems or what challenges they're facing in their product development side, and see if there's anything that we might be able to do to help them out.
Cool. That's awesome. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about Realize?
So, we've got a website, realizeinc.com. We do have an online quoting system as well. That's a little bit more for kind of like just basic parts. When it comes to, say, more advanced things, we do want to have like more of a proposal kind of setup where we have those conversations. So, we have yourpartners@realizeinc.com is a good email address to kind of open up a conversation. And again, on our website, we've also got like a form you can fill out for attaching a file that way. And, versus getting a quote right away instantly, you're again opening up that conversation. And so there's a couple different ways you can get rid of us. Obviously, talking to Troy, he'll give us names every once in a while, and vice versa. When we get calls for CAD design or whatever, we'll typically shoot them your way as well. But it's been a good partnership with you over the last, pretty much started. So you guys started in 98 and we started in 99. So been quite a ride. A few more gray hairs now, or less hair, one of the two.
Yep. Mine blend into the background.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I'll put all this information on the website, and put a link to your website on there as well.
Okay. Yeah. Again, appreciate being the opportunity to be this vendor out here for you. I know you've done a couple of these podcasts, and kind of a cool thing.
Yeah. Yep. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks.
To learn more about Impulse and how we might be able to help you, visit impulseproductdevelopment.com.